invite Mr. Andrew Jones, who works for the Fair Work Ombudsman. He will tell us about work regulations, duties, and obligations. Andrew.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I work for the Fair Work Ombudsman, and I'll explain in a minute a bit more about what we do. I work in the compliance part of our office here in Perth, where we do investigations regarding employment entitlements. I don't actually work in our overseas worker teams. Somebody from that team couldn't be here today, but they are in the same area that I work in. Okay, I'll just tell you a little bit about what we do later on. Okay, who is the Fair Work Ombudsman? Basically, all employees have, regardless of whether they're from Australia or from overseas, if they're working here, have certain basic rights and protections at work. And we are an independent federal government agency that's responsible for providing impartial services to employers and to employees free of charge. We have offices in all capital cities and also 18 regional centres across Australia. In Western Australia we have an office here in Perth at 140 St George's Terrace, and we also have an office in Bunbury. In terms of what we do, a lot of what we do is provide information to people, and in a moment I'll provide a bit of an overview of the workplace relations system, and you'll see why it's important we provide information to people, because it is quite complicated. So this is mainly done through our contact centre, the Fair Work Info line, and also through our website. In terms of educating people, like I said, we've got a lot of information on our website, but we also are aware of areas, often there are areas where we get a lot of complaints, and we do targeted education and compliance campaigns in certain industries. So at the moment we've got campaigns going on in pharmacy, hospitality, hairdressing, and recently we've announced the results of targeted education and compliance campaign in service stations, which was just in WA in South Australia and the Northern Territory, and we did uncover quite a lot of underpayments and did get a lot of people back paid, so it's through that. So it's making sure that employers understand their obligations, but also making sure that we follow it up with some audit work. A significant proportion of our resources is dedicated to investigating complaints. We get about 28,000 complaints a year across Australia, and we recover millions of dollars for employees. And where necessary, we do take legal action to enforce compliance. The fines under the Workplace Relations Act are significant. They do run into often the tens of thousands of dollars. And I'll give a couple of examples of cases here at WA later on. And in doing our work, we make sure that we do work as much as possible with other organisations, be they unions, employer organisations, industry organisations. Okay. The workplace relations system in Australia has undergone a lot of change in the last few years, particularly since 2006. And we have a very complex system of minimum entitlements compared to most other countries. And a lot of that's because it's moving from a system where, in most places, it was a state-based system to a federal system. Ultimately, the system will be a lot simpler than what it was before, but we're not quite there yet. In Western Australia, things are different to every other state as well, because this is actually the only state that has a state-based system still. So there are some employees that actually aren't covered by the federal system, and they usually will be people who work for an individual, so a sole trader, or for a partnership. Most people are under the federal system, that's people who work for companies like proprietary limited at the end. If somebody's not sure and they contact us or they contact Wageline, which is the state body, we'll establish that first up, so people don't really have to know. For some people, it doesn't make a lot of difference to their entitlements. For others, it will make a big difference. There are some things that we're not responsible for, like superannuation, and there's other things, that aren't federal, like health and safety isn't workers' compensation. So our legislation is the Fair Work Act, and under that there's a few things that I'll go through in a moment. It is important to point out there is another organisation that's kind of the other main body that's responsible for administering the system. They're called the Fair Work Commission. They used to be called Fair Work Australia, so they have a very similar name to us, and that can be quite confusing. So we provide information, we investigate matters. They do things like that. They make awards and agreements that provide for minimum entitlements. If somebody's got an unfair dismissal, they'll go to them, or they're the tribunal that determines minimum wage increases and that sort of thing. So again, if somebody comes to us and they've gone to the wrong place, we'll point them in the right direction. But because it's a very similar name, it does get a bit confusing. What I'll do now is I'll just explain some of the different aspects of the minimum entitlements that apply to people. First up is there are some entitlements that apply to particular people according to where they work, but the National Employment Standards are 10 standards that apply to everybody, and that's regardless of where they work or what other awards, for example, might apply to them. The minimum entitlements are, and this is for annual leave, this is just for permanent employees, not for casuals. 4 weeks annual leave. Some shift workers will get an extra week's leave a year. 10 days personal carers leave. That includes sick leave per year, again not for casuals. And there's this other thing called compassionate leave where if you've got a member of the family who's of your household who has like a life-threatening injury or illness, or if somebody dies, then there is an additional entitlement there. Unpaid parental leave, 12 months with the potential for an additional 12 months. Maximum weekly hours of work. This is an area that is a bit confusing because it's never actually been, the legislation hasn't been tested very much, but it basically says that the ordinary hours of work are 38 for a full-time employee, plus reasonable additional hours, and reasonable additional hours can actually be quite significant. But where this part of the legislation would be relevant is if somebody, for example, is being asked to work additional hours, they've got family responsibilities, or it's a lot more hours and they're not getting paid more for it and that sort of thing. It doesn't mean it's not a cap on the working week on 38 hours. The right to request flexible working arrangements. That's primarily for parents or carers of the child under school age. The other 5 things in the National Employment Standards are community service leave, so for jury service, or if you've got voluntary, somebody who works for a voluntary emergency service, they can access leave. Long service leave, it is actually a state government responsibility, long service leave, and that, depending on the state, often it's like if somebody's been employed for 10 years, they'll be entitled to public holidays, so a paid day off on a public holiday, unless there's a reasonable requirement for you to work on that day. Notice of termination and redundancy pay, so if somebody's going to be terminated, unless they're casual, depending on how long they've been there, it's up to 5 weeks notice of termination, and if it's a redundancy, up to 16 weeks redundancy pay. And the final thing in the National Employment Standards is when everybody starts work, they should be given a fair work information statement that provides quite a lot of information to people on the system, on their rights and obligations. I did leave some fact sheets over there that goes in just outlines these things a little bit. Another thing that isn't in the National Employment Standards is minimum wages, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, awards. I don't know if everybody's heard about awards and knows what they are, but basically it's a document. It's legally enforceable and contains a range of minimum employment conditions, so wages, and often they usually will have additional amounts of working nights or weekends and working overtime, there'll be allowances and that sort of thing. And they might be based on somebody's occupation. So, for example, there's a clerical award. So if somebody's a clerical worker, often it will apply to them. Or if there might be an industry award, so there's like there's an award that comes to the restaurant industry, for example, on a range of people that work there. Now, what that means is that if an award applies to somebody, that often people might be paid more than the award, and that's fine as long as what they're getting overall is enough to cover their minimum entitlements. But it's not possible for somebody to contract out of the award. So even if somebody agrees to be paid less than the minimum, and they might even sign a contract to that effect, it's actually not legally enforceable because the minimum will always be the award. There is a bit of, that usually there's 122 modern awards. In the past, there's been like thousands of state awards, and this, part of the confusion is there is kind of phasing from, until the middle of next year, some conditions phase from what the conditions used to be to what they are now. But from the middle of next year, that finishes, and there'll be a much simpler system than what we've had previously. So if people want to find out whether they're covered by an award or what, if they're an employer, what they're supposed to pay, we're the body that people come to find that out. Now, if businesses don't want to be covered by awards, they're able to enter into enterprise agreements, which are unlike contracts in that they can overrule award conditions. Usually they're bigger businesses that make them. Often they make things simpler, so that they won't have as many entitlements in them, but they're approved by the Fair Work Commission, so overall people aren't going to be worse off than the award. People need to, if they're trying to figure out what the minimum entitlements are, they need to figure out is it an award or is it an agreement. If people aren't covered by an award agreement, they're called award-free employees, there is still a minimum wage. It's the national minimum wage since the 1st of July this year is $16.37 an hour, or $20.30 for casuals. It's highly unlikely that there are some circumstances, like if you're a trainee or if you're a junior, for example, where you can be paid less than that. It's highly unlikely otherwise that people can be paid less than that. So, I guess that's a kind of a snapshot of where people's minimum entitlements come from. If people have got like a contractual entitlement, say somebody's got a contract to be paid $80,000 a year and they end up being paid $70,000 a year, we can't assist with that. That's a contractual matter. We're there to kind of assist with the minimum entitlements. And in some industries, the minimum entitlements are a lot more relevant than in other industries, depending on how competitive the industry is and what have you. So we have a lot of problems in cleaning, fast food, industries like that. Okay, workers from overseas have, in terms of our legislation, they have exactly the same entitlements as everybody else. People have to have permission to work in Australia. Technically, even if somebody is not a legal worker here, they still have entitlements under our legislation. It is important that people know the rules of their visas, and obviously it's been covered off before, but that's not to do with us, that's to do with the Department of Immigration and Citizenship. We have an overseas workers team, and the reason why we have some specialist teams, like we have a young workers team, for example, and in the agency, and that's because a significant proportion of our litigation, like our most serious matters, do involve overseas workers or have involved overseas workers. recently, we've prosecuted, or we've litigated, against a cleaning company here in Perth called Housekeeping, that we're having lots of complaints against them over time. The court wasn't cooperative, people consistently being underpaid. So we've recently taken court action against them. I guess we're waiting for a penalty to be handed down against them. Another matter that's been lodged in court that hasn't gone to court yet, so it's just an allegation at this stage, in the restaurant in the Netherlands called the Curry Tree. And what we're alleging there is there was a cook who was employed for 4 months and he was paid $200 at the beginning. That was it. So there's enough public interest to take that one to court. So it's just an allegation. If it hasn't been, the court hasn't been before the court yet. But it's certainly a matter that we're very interested in. The overseas workers team, they investigate complaints. It's also important that they do proactive work. Often, depending on where people are from and what industries they're working in, they may not know their retirements. They also may not want to complain. They might want to vote. So it's important that we do proactive work. So we're aware often of industries like horticulture is one where there's a lot of workers that we actually don't get a lot of complaints, but we know there's a lot of issues, so we do quite a lot of proactive work in that industry. And we can engage with stakeholders to find out, to get intelligence about what's going on, and to try and spread the message as well. That's very important for the team. Just a couple of things about things that are in the legislation that people should be aware of. Everybody's entitled to get a pay slip within a day of being paid. And that's got certain requirements so people actually understand what they're being paid. Unauthorised deductions, that's an area that we do get quite a lot of complaints about, including people that are, not so much recently, but in the past, people that are sponsored on visas and employers try to claw back costs by deducting amounts in their wages. Apart from tax, it's highly unlikely that somebody can lawfully make a deduction from somebody's wages unless it's authorised in writing and it's actually for that person's benefit as well. So that's a protection in the legislation. People can't be paid goods or services instead of wages. So if somebody's being paid food or accommodation, that should be they can't be given that instead. Like they'd have to authorise it to be deducted and pay out for that. And just finally, being paid in cash in hand is illegal. Somebody can be paid cash, but tax has to still be paid in cash rather than electronic transfer. But tax would still have to be taken out. On our website, we do have a lot of information. There's things on this page in terms of tools and resources that probably is more technical if people want to drill down to minimum conditions. Got a range of calculators and things that people can figure out if they're covered by an award and that sort of thing. Our website generally, fairwork.gov.au, does have a lot of fact sheets. It has information in different languages. That's the information for the Fair Work info line, which again, people can use the translator and interpreting service to get through. We've got a range of guides and information on the website. And there's kind of like social media details as well. Not that I've ever looked up our Facebook page, I have to admit, but I'm sure it's very important. And like I said before, if people do want to come and talk to somebody face to face, we're at 140 St George's Terrace. Our floor is actually blocked off, but so people have to go to the concierge, but they don't need to make an appointment. And finally, like I said before, I've left some fact sheets over there. There's also pennies that you might have if people want to help themselves. And obviously I'll be around afterwards if people have got any questions.
This is very important for young workers and all the new visitors who are here for the first time, and there's they still don't know what they're entitled to receive from Australian employers and what they can or can't do. So thank you very much again for this. Now, moving on.